people since our early days as our cavemen, all right, our life, okay, we have to run away from danger, for example. We run towards good things, for example. It's all a form of reward, all right? And as you can see, the reward, so dopamine actually controls your reward and your motor function. Additionally, dopamine also controls this function called compulsion. So compulsively, you want to do something, all right? And this is very much in line with the smoking behavior. Like a lot of us know that smoking is not good for health, but then the smokers, although knowing that it might not be so good for their health, they will still go and smoke when the craving is there. So that compulsion, and we all know that it is only when the element of compulsion is there, then we can say somebody has an addictive behavior, for example. So all this actually is being wired in the blue color zone, all right, in your dopamine pathway, all right. And so this actually helps to a smoker to continue smoking, because compulsively the smoker will seek the cigarette whenever he or she feels bad, all right, or whenever he or she has this craving to wants to feel good. And dopamine also control your perseverance. And so although you know that it's not good, but you persevere in that behavior nevertheless, all right. And so this is how the dopamine actually kind of take over the brain when it comes to seeking pleasurable behavior. Then we want to talk a little about the serotonin, which is the red color side. Serotonin actually controls your memory processing, so your short-term memory, your long-term memory, all right? So it not only controls your sleep, but it also controls your mood and your decision making. And therefore, remember the experiential avoidance. So when we feel bad, we want to feel good, right? So the serotonin pathway kicks in to say, hey, okay, now I'm feeling bad, but I want to feel good. And I remember that when I was smoking previously, I was feeling good. And therefore, the brain actually makes a decision to say, okay, so now I want to feel good. I need to go back to smoking. And so if you look at here, there are your prefrontal cortex here that leads to your hippocampus here that says, hey, I want to feel good. Now I'm not feeling good, but I want to feel good, all right? And smoking is actually a learned behavior, because previously when the smoker smoked, the smoker felt good, right? So in the brain, you learn to associate smoking with feeling good. And so now that you are feeling bad and you want to feel good, all right, the brain would then secrete the hormone and say, okay, so yeah, I remember that, you know, when I was smoking, I feel good. And so right now, in order for me to feel good, I need to smoke. And therefore, you create this hedonic liking, or the hedonic cycle, that every time you feel bad, there will be these two hormones coming into play in your brain, and therefore you compulsively, the word here is compulsively and continuously seek smoking to feel good, even though some of you might be trying to quit smoking and you find that it is very difficult, especially when you're going through a difficult times, especially during the pandemic. It is not just a matter of willpower, it is actually the neurotransmitter in your brain, all right? And so actually some of you say, yeah, but no matter how I tried, you know, I couldn't really do it. Yeah, so it is not really, quitting smoking is not really just a matter of willpower. And I always tell my smokers, it's not just willpower. So let's try to find scientific way to help you, and it is really the science behind your neurotransmitter that is creating this compulsion to smoking. So what do we do then? Is there then, you know, no solution to it? So the solution here is mindfulness, because when you practice mindfulness, again, Harvard and Cambridge has done a lot of research on mindfulness over the past decade, and they have done a lot of brain scans on people who, you know, practice mindfulness, and they find that when you practice mindfulness for a long time, it actually impacts a few parts of your brain that is colored here, all right? And these few parts of the brain actually kind of correlate to the part of the brain that was involved in the dopamine pathway and the, remember what I said just now? The blue and the red pathway, the serotonin pathway, that's right, all right? And so when you look at this, then you know, then it kind of gives you a solution, right? Because remember, when it comes to smoking, it is the motivation, the incentive that you want to feel good. And then you remember that when you smoke, you actually feels good. And therefore, now that you have a cue, you know, a trigger, whether it is a visual cue or emotional cue, and automatically you associate smoking to feeling good, and automatically you want to go and smoke. But in this picture, you actually see that mindfulness can actually help to impact this part of the brain, and therefore it actually helps you to be able to keep in check that compulsion and the continuous seeking of smoking in order for you to feel good. All right. So, for example, when you practice mindfulness for a long time, all right, certain parts of your brain that is important in that addictive behavior actually shrinks, and certain parts of the brain that is important for you to make better decision actually thickens. And so with the shrinking of the parts of the brain, all right, the amygdala, for example, that controls your emotions and the Pavlov processing. The Pavlov processing is the associating the smoking with the feeling good, all right? So while it shrinks that, okay, so it actually thickens the prefrontal cortex, which helps you to make decision in life. So if this becomes smaller and this becomes bigger, the smoker then have less craving, and whenever the person have a craving, this takes over and say, hey, do I really need to smoke now? Because now I'm actually trying to quit smoking. So the thinking process comes in, and therefore with these structural changes in your brain, it actually helps you to be able to kind of disconnect that learned behavior that smokers have learned over the years from their smoking habit. Of course, the scale of the changes behind your brain actually correlates with the number of hours of meditation practice that you have done. And according to the researches that has been done, the more hours you spend doing meditation, the more structural change in your brain there will be, and therefore you will be better off to be able to recruit your higher order and your prefrontal cortex regions in order to down-regulate your lower order brain activity. All right, and so then quitting smoking then become a conscious decision. The choice to pick up a cigarette becomes a conscious decision, because a lot of my smokers tell me, but you know, it's unconscious. I sometimes don't even notice that I actually light up, but I light it up. All right. So it is from an unconscious behavior. As you practice mindfulness, these behaviors become more conscious to you, and therefore then you can, with awareness, you can then ask yourself, oh, yeah, I have a craving now, but I'm trying to quit smoking. So do I really have to pick up that cigarette at this point of time? Okay. So as you can see from, for example, this brain scan from one of the experiments, even after 2 weeks of just mindfulness practice, all right, we can see that there's an increased activity in the ACC. And the ACC is, with the increased activity in the ACC of the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, remember, is the one that helps you make better decisions. And so with increased activity in the ACC of the prefrontal cortex, the person actually has increased awareness and therefore can make better decisions. in trying to stop addictive behaviors like smoking, for example, okay? And this is just after 2 weeks of practice. So when we said the more hours you practice, the more structural change you can, but some of you might say, so how long do I need to start practice before I can see the change? Okay, so you can see that just after 2 weeks of a daily practice, all right, you will be able to see the change. And of course, mindfulness itself is a practice. It is not theory, and so you need to put in effort to practice in order to be able to reap the rewards. Okay, so essentially, what is mindfulness? All right. Some of you might be asking, so what exactly is mindfulness? Some of you might have heard of mindfulness before. Some of you might not have heard of mindfulness. It might be your first time. So what exactly is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness, learning about mindfulness can be, years of lessons. But today I'm going to give you a Reader Digest version of less than 5 minutes crash course on what mindfulness is. Just to get you started to practice mindfulness. All right. So in short, mindfulness is really about the paying attention to your internally paying attention to how you're feeling, what are your thoughts, what are your feelings, your emotions, your bodily sensations, and what is the inner commentaries that is going on in your mind all the time. What is the judgment in you? All right. And because all these actually impact your decision to smoke, right? So for example, if you're feeling tired and you want to perk yourself up, so bodily sensation, you're feeling tired. And by experience, you know that, okay, when I smoke, I can actually become more alert. So you actually then reach for a cigarette, all right? For it, or your emotions, when you're feeling down, when you're not feeling so good, and you know that, if I want to perk, yeah, I want to feel happier, I could smoke. And so the feeling not so good actually becomes a trigger, okay, to your smoking habits. And for a lot of smokers who says that, yeah, I lost count. I sometimes I'm not aware of why I light up. This small awareness is a good first step, because with this awareness, you can make that 1 second choice that, okay, do I really want to light up? Yes, now I'm feeling tired and I want to feel less tired because I'm at work. Do I really want to light up to feel less tired, or is there another way for me to feel less tired? Maybe doing 10 squats, doing 20 squats, doing 10 push-ups, doing 20 push-ups. It might make me feel less tired because, again, physical activity, exercise, also activate your dopamine pathway. So you could feel less tired doing exercise, or you could feel less tired smoking. I say, hey, but I cannot go for a run. Yeah, you cannot go for a run, but you can always stand up and do 10 or 20 squats. You can always do your push-up, right? And that kind of helps to beat that tiredness away as well. So then you actually have that 1 second to make a different choice. And by making a different choice, you might be a little more successful as you go on your journey in quitting smoking. Then, of course, sometimes when we, most of us, our brain are active all the time. Even for some of you now sitting here listening to me, you might be thinking of something else, all right? And it's normal because we're all human, all right? All these thoughts in you, this judgment in you, all these inner commentaries, sometimes it's so much actions going in your brain, it is difficult for you to be aware of what's happening outside. And so how do you then quiet all these birds down? How do you remove all these birds from flying around in your brain? All right. That is where you practice mindfulness, when you start to pay attention to all this, and you know that, hey, these are flying around too much and I need to quiet them down. And what can I do to quiet them down, right? First, you just need to take notice of them. Okay, so there's a lot of thoughts now. I'm feeling pretty stressed because there are too much thinking going up there, and the brain is like a sponge. It's just this big, and if within this big there's so many birds flying up there, there's no more space, and you feel very tense, right? But what you can do is just to take note of it, watch them, observe what is doing to you, what all these thoughts are doing to you. Are they making you feel anxious? Are